Tell me how that
reduce.
would work.
You essentially place a cap on emissions, you give permits or allowances to entities, and you allow them to trade across the board.
You put a tax on carbon?
Well, it's different than a tax because you can freely grant these allowances, and then it's trading. So
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm diving into a heated and intense Senate hearing where Senator Kennedy grilled a witness who thinks it's okay to tax Americans for carbon emissions. The back and forth in this one is absolutely wild, especially when the senator tries to pin down exactly how much it would cost to decarbonize by 2050. Let's break it down segment by segment and see what's really happening here. Kennedy kicks things off by asking the witness what 3 things he would do to tackle the issue of carbon emissions if he had all the power. Now this is where things start to get really interesting. Dr. Rose's first answer was that he'd invest in carbon capture and storage. Now that's a pretty technical solution, and it's basically about trapping carbon dioxide emissions before they even get released into the atmosphere. His second move, he'd pass a renewable portfolio standard, essentially a law that would shift the United States towards renewable energy sources. Sounds pretty straightforward. Dr. Rose's third solution was a cap and trade bill. This is where things get heated. He starts explaining that a cap and trade system would place a limit on emissions and allow companies to trade permits, but Kennedy doesn't seem to buy into it. And honestly, a lot of people feel the same way. It sounds good in theory, but how does it really work in practice? Kennedy digs into the details here asking, isn't this just a tax on carbon? Dr. Rose pushes back, saying that cap and trade is different because it involves trading permits rather than imposing a straight-up tax. But Kennedy's not convinced. And honestly, I get it. There's a lot of wordplay going on when it comes to the difference between a tax and a permit system. It's all about how you present it. But at the end of the day, the cost still lands somewhere.
Dr. Rose, can you give me, if you were king for a day, the 3 things you would do?
we'll start on something that you might find more attractive. I'd invest.
I'm not interested in attractive.
Right. No, I'd invest.
But I've been to so many of these hearings
Right.
where people come and talk about catastrophe, and you say, okay, what do we do about it? And you get nothing but nonsense.
Right.
So if you could give me, this is your chance, just 3 specific things, King, that you would do.
So I would invest in carbon capture and storage. I don't think we need to get rid of all fossil fuels immediately.
That's one. Number 2.
Number 2, I would pass a renewable portfolio standard for the U.S., which calls for a shift to renewables and electricity generation. So I recently completed a study where the...
Don't have time.
All right.
What's number 3?
I would pass a cap and trade bill in the U.S. to find the least cost ways of dealing with climate change.
Tell me how that would work.
You essentially place a cap on emissions, you give permits or allowances to entities, and you allow them to trade. That trading shifts the cost burden to the lowest cost entities. We found that can save 70% of the potential costs of dealing with climate change as opposed to passing across the board.
You put a tax on carbon?
Well, it's different than a tax because you can freely grant these allowances, and then it's trading. So it's not a tax. It's different than a tax.
All right. How much do you think all this will cost? Your best guess.
I don't have a dollar figure, but the figure is a lot lower than what I've heard on this side of the aisle today.
Kennedy's frustration reflects a common feeling among people when it comes to climate change solutions. There's plenty of talk about what we need to do, but very few people can put a price tag on it. And without that, how can we make informed decisions? It's a tough question, but it's one that needs answering if we're serious about tackling this issue. So, what do we make of this whole exchange? Senator Kennedy is clearly frustrated by the lack of concrete answers, and honestly, I can't blame him. We're talking about potentially hundreds of billions of dollars, and no one seems to know exactly how much it'll cost to decarbonize by 2050. What do you think? Should we push for more transparent answers before making any big decisions, or should we trust the experts and move forward? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.